I thought my season for love had come and gone. I'd packed away my dreams, convinced that love belonged to the young. But then he came, silver-haired, smooth-voiced, and worth billions. And somehow, he saw me. What happened next changed everything I believed about love, age, and second chances. If you've ever felt like love skipped over you, or that your time has passed, this story is for you. Don't scroll away, hit subscribe, grab a warm drink, and stay with me. What I'm about to share is proof that love doesn't care about age. It just needs an open heart. I'm 52 years old, black woman, single, independent. And honestly, I had made peace with all of it. Most mornings started the same way. Early sunlight through my kitchen window, the smell of hazelnut coffee filling the air, and the gentle hum of the radio playing old school R&B. I liked the quiet. I'd sip my coffee slowly, flipping through the news on my phone, sometimes shaking my head at the world, sometimes smiling at a silly meme one of my nieces sent me overnight. Then it was off to work. Same job I'd been doing for years, something I was good at, something steady. I wasn't chasing promotions anymore. I wasn't chasing much of anything, really. Evenings were simple, dinner for one, phone calls with family, maybe an episode or two of a show everyone had already binged 3 months ago. I took walks when the weather was kind, lit candles even when no one was coming over, read romance novels knowing full well the endings were predictable. But I liked them, those stories. They reminded me of a time when I still believed in that kind of thing. I used to think love was the most important part of life. I'd fallen hard in my 20s and again in my 30s. Once, I even thought I'd found the one. He had dimples, a warm laugh, and a habit of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Until he wasn't. Until he found someone younger, softer, less complicated. That break, that particular one, carved something out of me. And I don't think I ever truly let love back in after that. It wasn't like I hated men. I didn't even feel bitter, at least not all the time. I just stopped trying, stopped hoping. The apps, deleted, the blind dates, politely declined. The idea of falling in love again felt exhausting, like something better suited for women with more energy, more time, more glow. I looked in the mirror and saw strength, yes, but also lines, stories, survival. And somewhere along the way, I told myself, love isn't for you anymore. Not at this stage, not with this history. At some point, I just decided it wasn't for me anymore. That love belonged to girls with smooth skin and fewer scars. And I was okay with that. Truly, I had a good life. I had my family, my peace, and a home that felt like mine. The silence didn't scare me. The absence of romance didn't feel like a hole. I'd patched it up with self-respect and solitude. That was enough. Or so I thought, because life has a way of surprising you. Just when you've stopped waiting for the door to open, someone walks in, and not just anyone. A man who made me question everything I thought I knew. A man who reminded me that love doesn't check your age or your scars before it chooses you. But I didn't know any of that yet. Back then, I was just a woman with her coffee, her candles, and her quiet routines. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was my friend Lisa, loud and persistent as always. She had this way of dragging me out of my comfort zone, whether I liked it or not. "There's a charity gala this Saturday," she said, voice bubbling through the speaker. "You have to come. Don't say no." I started forming an excuse right away. My knee was acting up. I had laundry to do. I was sure I had nothing to wear, but Lisa wasn't buying any of it. "You've been locked away in that cozy little world of yours for too long," she said. "Put on a dress, do your hair, and come be fabulous with me." And so, reluctantly, I went. The event was held at one of those glitzy hotels downtown, the kind with marble floors and golden chandeliers that made everything feel like a movie set. I walked in and immediately felt like I didn't belong. Everyone looked so polished, women in sleek gowns, men in tailored suits, laughter floating through the air like champagne bubbles. I smoothed down the navy blue dress Lisa had convinced me to wear and tried to blend in. I stuck close to the bar, sipping a glass of sparkling water and people watching. Lisa had disappeared into a sea of handshakes and hugs, and I was fine with that. Truth be told, I was counting down the minutes until I could slip out unnoticed and go home to my robe and slippers. Then I spilled my drink. One second I was trying to step aside, and the next, the cold fizz of sparkling water was running down someone's perfectly pressed sleeve. My heart jumped straight to my throat. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I blurted out, reaching for a napkin with shaky hands. He laughed, not a fake, polite chuckle, but a real one, deep and warm. "It's just water," he said, eyes kind and unbothered. "No harm done." I looked up and for the first time really saw him. Tall, salt and pepper hair, a presence that felt both powerful and relaxed. He had the kind of confidence that didn't scream. It whispered, calm, effortless. I smiled, embarrassed, and tried to apologize again, but he just waved it off. "Since you've already made a splash," he said playfully, "you might as well dance with me." I blinked. "What?" He held out his hand. "Come on, one dance." I hadn't danced with a man in years, and certainly not in a room full of strangers, but something about his voice made it hard to say no. So I nodded, slipped my hand into his, and followed him to the edge of the dance floor. We swayed slowly, the music soft and jazzy in the background. I still didn't know who he was. He asked about my work, my hobbies, my favorite book. And he listened, not just politely, but with genuine curiosity. It was disarming. Before the song ended, he leaned in and said, "I'm Edward, by the way." I gave him my name. He smiled. "Pleasure to meet you. I hope this won't be our last dance." I laughed, unsure of what to say. I didn't expect anything, not from a man like him, but something had shifted in that brief moment. A spark I hadn't felt in years had quietly stirred inside me. Later that night, Lisa would tell me I'd just danced with Edward Langston, the billionaire tech investor, philanthropist, and one of the most powerful men in the city. But in that moment, he was just a kind stranger with warm eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen, and that feeling would stay with me, quietly burning, long after the music stopped. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I woke up thinking about a man, not in a heavy, obsessive kind of way. It was more like a softness sitting quietly in my chest, a little smile I couldn't shake. I tried to brush it off, chalk it up to the mood of the gala, the music, the wine. But Edward's voice kept echoing in my mind. The way he looked at me like I was the only person in that crowded room. Still, I didn't expect to hear from him again. Men like that, charming, well-dressed, with a name people whispered when he walked into a room. They don't call women like me. I figured it was just a nice dance and a nicer memory. But 3 days later, a bouquet of tulips showed up at my office. My assistant brought them in with a grin on her face. I opened the small white card. Just 3 words. "Had a wonderful evening." I stared at it for a full minute, not because I didn't understand it, but because something inside me wasn't sure I believed it. Edward Langston, the same man I'd read about in the business section. Billionaire, widely respected, rumored to own properties all over the world. That Edward had sent me flowers. I laughed a little nervously and set the vase beside my computer. My hands trembled just slightly. Later that week, he called. No assistant, no pretense, just him. "I was wondering if I could take you to lunch," he said, his voice just as calm and grounded as I remembered. "Somewhere quiet. I'd like to get to know you better." My instinct was to say no, not because I didn't want to go, but because I was afraid of wanting it too much, afraid of opening doors I'd shut so long ago. But there was something about Edward, something that didn't feel rushed or pushy. He wasn't chasing a thrill. He was offering space, a seat at his table, a moment of presence. So I said yes. That lunch turned into dinner the next week, then a walk through a museum, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. Every time we met, I waited for the catch, waited for the mask to slip, but it never did. He didn't brag about his money. In fact, he barely mentioned it. What he did talk about was his mother, who raised him alone after his father passed, how he still made his own coffee every morning out of habit, how success was loud, but loneliness was quiet, and that most people only saw the first part. He asked questions no one else had bothered to ask me in years. What's something that still makes you laugh like a kid? What song brings you peace? What do you miss about your 20s? He made me feel like I mattered, like my experiences, my opinions, my memories were worth something. It wasn't the expensive suit or the fancy restaurant that made me nervous. It was how genuinely he looked at me, as if he saw past my age, past the insecurities I'd wrapped around myself like armor. His eyes didn't flinch at my laugh lines or the curve of my arms. He saw me as a woman, not a project, not a placeholder, just me. And I started to soften, not all at once, but slowly, like spring snow melting into the earth. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be pursued, not for convenience or out of boredom, but because someone truly wanted to be near you, to hear your thoughts, to sit in your silence, and maybe, just maybe, I wanted to be seen, wanted to believe that even at 52, love could still recognize me when it walked through the door. And this time, it looked like Edward Langston. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who got courted. That word always felt so old-fashioned, like something out of a Jane Austen novel. But Edward made it feel new again, gentle, thoughtful, unhurried. He didn't rush me. He didn't expect anything. He simply showed up, again and again. He called when he said he would. Not texts, not vague "hey you" messages, actual calls. And when he asked how I was doing, he really listened. He remembered the little things, the way I liked mint tea instead of coffee in the evening, how I always read the last chapter of a book first, how I never went anywhere without lip balm in my purse. It wasn't the kind of attention that overwhelms you. It was quiet, consistent, like water wearing down stone. Every time I told myself to be careful, to take it slow, Edward seemed one step ahead of me. He moved with patience, like he wasn't trying to convince me of anything, just offering space for something to grow if I wanted it to. And honestly, that made me want it more. He invited me to lunch at a quiet spot near the waterfront, where we sat for hours watching sailboats glide by, while we talked about childhood dreams and books that made us cry. Another time, he showed up with a bag of takeout and insisted we watch a silly comedy in my living room. Said he needed a break from his big shot life. I laughed at the idea, but the moment he kicked off those expensive shoes and tucked his long legs under my coffee table, I believed him. He didn't try to impress me with things. He impressed me with time, with intention, with kindness. And slowly, I started to let go of my guard. One evening, after dinner, we stood outside his car under the soft glow of a street lamp. I was wearing a scarf he had given me, not as a gift, but because I said I was cold once, and he remembered. He took my hand and said, "You have a beautiful laugh. You know that?" I felt my face heat up like I was 16. I looked away, smiling. "Haven't heard it much these days," I admitted. He gently squeezed my fingers. Then I'll do my best to keep it coming. That moment stayed with me. People assume that love fades as you get older, that it's all logic and compatibility and no spark. But with Edward, there was warmth, flutters, the kind I thought I'd buried for good. He brought parts of me back to life I hadn't realized had gone quiet. And it wasn't about money or gifts or any of that. It was how he made me feel like I could just be. Be soft, be seen, be loved, without having to earn it. He never made me feel like I was starting from behind, never treated my age or history like baggage. In fact, he once told me, I'm not looking for perfect, I'm looking for real. That line sat in my chest for days, so I let him in, inch by inch. A walk turned into a weekend lunch. A phone call became a late night drive. He'd text me just to say goodnight. I'd send him a photo of the sky when it reminded me of something we talked about. I didn't realize I was falling. Not until one morning I woke up, looked at my phone, and smiled just because his name was there. I had forgotten what hope felt like. But with Edward, hope didn't come crashing in. It knocked gently, then waited. And finally, I opened the door. Falling in love at this age is different. It's not all butterflies and breathless kisses. It's quieter, slower, and sometimes it's shadowed by a fear that whispers things you don't want to hear. As much as I enjoyed my time with Edward, our slow walks, long talks, the way he looked at me like I mattered, there were moments, usually late at night, when I'd lie awake and wonder, what is he doing with me? He was a man with a world at his feet, literally. His life was filled with things I had only seen on TV or read about in magazines. Luxury cars, private jets, tailor-made everything. I'd seen pictures of the women he used to be seen with, flawless, polished, the kind who knew how to float through high society without breaking a sweat. And then there was me, 52, no designer wardrobe, a woman who bought her dresses off the clearance rack and still clipped grocery coupons on Sundays. That ugly little voice in my head started getting louder. It first happened at a charity dinner he invited me to. I said yes, but the moment I walked into the room, I regretted it. Everyone looked like they belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Hair sleek, gowns perfect, smiles effortless. I wore a simple black dress, the one I always kept for nice occasions, and suddenly it felt all wrong. I felt all wrong. The women glanced at me with curiosity. Some were subtle, some weren't. Their eyes flicked from my face to my shoes, to my hand on Edward's arm. I could feel it, questions hanging in the air like perfume. Who is she? Why her? I smiled. I made polite conversation. I did my best to pretend I was comfortable, but I wasn't. The laughter around me felt too sharp, the room too cold. I wanted to disappear. After the event, I was quiet on the drive home. Edward noticed. You're somewhere else, he said gently. I'm just tired, I lied, staring out the window. But the truth was, I was pulling away. Not from him, at least not intentionally, but from the idea that this could be real. I convinced myself he'd eventually see what they saw, that he'd wake up one day and realize I wasn't shiny enough to fit into his world. I even thought about ending things, not because I didn't care about him, but because I did. I wanted to leave before it hurt, before the fall became too deep. One night, while we sat on the balcony of his penthouse, sipping tea under the stars, I finally told him, I don't fit in your world, Edward, I said quietly, and I don't want to be someone you settle for just because you're tired of being alone. He turned to me, his expression steady. Is that what you think I'm doing? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The lump in my throat was too heavy. He took my hand, warm and firm. You fit in my world because you're in my heart. I don't need another ornament on my arm. I need someone who sees me, who grounds me. That's you." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. He didn't flinch, just pulled me gently into his arms. I realized in that moment that the voice in my head wasn't telling the truth. It was telling old stories, stories born from past hurt, not from this new love. And slowly I started rewriting those stories, one quiet, tender day at a time. It was a rainy Sunday evening when Edward showed me a piece of his heart I hadn't seen before. We were curled up on the couch at his place, a soft jazz record playing in the background, the kind that makes the whole world feel slower. I had kicked off my shoes and tucked my feet under me, wrapped in one of his oversized sweaters I'd borrowed the week before. The windows fogged up from the warmth inside, blurring the city lights like a painting in motion. We weren't talking much, just sipping tea, wrapped in that easy kind of silence you share with someone who's become a part of your daily rhythm. I liked those moments best. No pressure to be clever or charming, just real. But then he said something that shifted the air between us. "I was married once." His voice was low, softer than usual. I looked at him, not surprised by the fact itself. I'd assumed as much, but it was the weight in his voice that caught me off guard. "She passed away over a decade ago," he continued. "It wasn't sudden. It was cancer, slow, painful, unfair." I stayed quiet, letting him lead. She was the first person who really knew me, who saw me when I was still building everything, back when I was broke and hopeful and running on coffee and ambition. He paused, eyes far away. "After she died, I threw myself into work. Built an empire, they say. But most nights I'd come home to silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that echoes. I reached for his hand, not because I had the perfect words, but because sometimes the best thing you can offer is presence. I dated a little after," he admitted, "but nothing stuck. I didn't want companionship. I wanted distraction, noise, someone to fill the space." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "And then I met you." My breath caught. "I didn't expect you to knock the wind out of me," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "But you did. Not because you tried. You just were, you, unapologetic, grounded, real. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. "I'm not looking for perfect," he continued. "I'm not chasing some fantasy. I've done that. I've seen how empty that road is. I want something honest, something that meets me where I am, scars, gray hairs, history and all." That's when the tears came, mine, this time, quiet, steady tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't dared to hope for anymore. It's strange how grief and love can sit side by side like old friends, how one man's heartbreak could open a door to healing in someone else. His vulnerability made me feel safe enough to release some of my own. I told him how I used to believe love had passed me by, that I'd told myself I didn't need it anymore, that I wasn't sure I knew how to accept it if it came knocking. "You're doing just fine," he whispered, brushing a tear from my cheek, and in that moment I believed him. We sat together for a long time, hand in hand, two people who had seen life wear its weight into their shoulders. But somehow, through all the loss and loneliness, we had found each other. And in his confession, I didn't see a broken man. I saw a whole one who had walked through fire and still chose softness, still chose love, and somehow he chose me. After Edward opened up to me that night, something shifted between us, not in a dramatic fireworks kind of way, but in that subtle, soul-deep way where everything feels warmer, easier, more certain. We had crossed into something real, not a fairy tale, but something better, truth. A week later, he asked if I had a passport. I laughed. Why? You planning to kidnap me? He grinned. Italy, just for a few days. The Amalfi Coast. There's a quiet villa I visit when I need to reset. I want you to see it. I froze. My first instinct was to say no. I was still a woman who double-checked her budget before buying organic fruit. Flying off to Italy with a billionaire felt like someone else's story, not mine. But the way Edward looked at me, like I wasn't just invited but wanted, made something in me soften. I said yes, and I'm so glad I did. The moment we stepped off the plane, I felt like I had been dropped into a postcard. The sun kissed everything golden. The air smelled of lemons and salt and olive trees. Edward held my hand the entire drive to the villa, and I couldn't stop staring out the window, like a child seeing magic for the first time. The villa itself wasn't massive or flashy. It was charming, tucked into a hillside, with white stone walls, wooden shutters, and a view that seemed to stretch across the entire Mediterranean. There was a balcony where we had breakfast every morning, just fresh bread, figs, and espresso. It was so simple, so perfect. We spent our days walking narrow cobblestone streets, laughing over bad tourist Italian, eating gelato in the sun. There was one evening we sat by the sea barefoot as the sky turned the color of ripe peaches. I looked over at him and thought, this is what peace looks like. This is what love feels like. It wasn't about the luxury. It never had been. It was about how safe I felt with him, how fully myself I could be. And somewhere during that trip, I realized I wasn't waiting for him to change his mind anymore. I wasn't bracing for the ending. I had stopped doubting his intentions and started trusting my own heart. Love wasn't rushing in like a storm. It was unfolding slowly, gently, like petals waking up to sunlight. And I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. One night, on that same balcony where we shared our morning coffee, Edward reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart skipped, but it wasn't a ring. Inside was a simple gold bracelet with a single word engraved on it, ours. I looked at him, confused, and he smiled. I don't want to pressure you. I don't want to rush anything, but I do want this, us, every part of it, whether we ever get married or not, whether we stay here or go home. I just want you to know I've chosen you, fully. No expiration, no doubt. Tears welled in my eyes again. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded, held out my wrist, and let him fasten the bracelet around it. I whispered, I choose you too. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a fling or a phase or some midlife fantasy. This was love. Real, steady, grown-up love. Love that didn't ask me to shrink or pretend. Love that saw every scar and stayed anyway. We weren't young, but we were in love. And that was more than enough. Looking back now, I sometimes laugh at how convinced I was that love was a closed chapter in my life. I really believed it had come and gone, that I had missed my window, that love was for the young, for the smooth-skinned, carefree versions of ourselves that the world always celebrates. But I was wrong, so deeply, wonderfully wrong. If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be waking up next to a man like Edward, gentle, intentional, and wildly in love with me, I would have smiled politely and changed the subject. I had grown so used to life on my own that I couldn't imagine letting someone else in. Not really. But love, real love, doesn't show up when you're ready. It shows up when it's right. And sometimes you don't even realize how much you've been craving it until it arrives. Slowly, sweetly, without warning. Edward didn't fix me. I wasn't broken. What he did was see me. Not the version of me I showed the world, but the full version. The woman with doubts, stretch marks, laugh lines, and lessons hard-earned. And somehow, He didn't flinch. He leaned in. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that love wasn't something you grow out of. It's something that grows with you. I didn't need to go back in time or be anyone else to deserve it. I only needed to stay open to the possibility that my story still had a beautiful chapter left. And that's what I want to leave you with. We spend so much of our lives chasing timelines, married by this age, kids by that one, accomplished, partnered, settled. And when life doesn't unfold the way we imagined, we start crossing things off our list. Love becomes a memory, not a future. We tell ourselves it's too late, that we've missed it, that we've become invisible. But let me be your proof. Love has no expiry date. You are not too old. You are not too complicated. You are not too late. You are right on time. Because love doesn't belong to the young, it belongs to the willing, to the brave, to the ones who show up with trembling hands and hopeful hearts, no matter what they've been through. And the beauty of finding love later in life? You bring your whole self to it. No games, no masks, just truth. You know what matters and what doesn't. You've learned what peace feels like. You've learned how to stand alone, and now you get to choose to stand together. That kind of love, it's rare and it's real. Edward and I still have quiet mornings with coffee, still share little jokes no one else would understand. We travel, yes, but we also do ordinary things, like grocery shopping and folding laundry. And every time he looks at me across the dinner table or reaches for my hand when we're watching a movie, I'm reminded that I didn't settle. I bloomed late, and that's okay, because love didn't pass me by. It waited, and when I was finally ready, it walked in wearing a quiet smile, holding tulips, and asking me to dance. And I said yes, not just to him, but to life, to love, to everything I thought I had missed. So if you're watching this and wondering if it could still happen for you, let me be the voice that says, yes, it can, and yes, it will. If you've ever thought love had passed you by, don't give up. Whether you're 30 or 70, your heart still beats and love still whispers your name. Like, subscribe, and share this if it touched your soul. You deserve a love story too, and it might begin today.